Hey guys, first we take a balloon, then we rub it in our hair, and we can make water move.
Science time. Big volcano, baking soda, vinegar. Oh, don't! Get out of here!
Six-second science.
Chris. John, what's up?
Well, I guess I missed you.
That hurt. Your turn.
Two objects of different weight fall at the same rate.
It's Gravity Day. Catch it.
Oh, it's a good looking apple. Thanks, Gary. Oh, yeah. Ha, gravity you do. Here you go, Gary.
Oh, he took a bite.
Oh, you guys dropped the apple too long. It's starting to look like this. Yuck.
Dude, this apple fell from the sky. What are you doing?
It's finally my turn!
Ugh! Ugh! Oh!
Peaceful results. What the heck?
Wow, gravity dam. I'll just get a new one.
That was a close one. Can you avoid it?
What? Lucky day.
It's the second time today.
What the?
Nice.
Hey, Shaq, can we get a hand for that video? So thanks for coming. Just to introduce again Paul Marcum, who's the Director of Global Digital Marketing. It's a privilege and honor to have you with us. Thanks for taking the time and how busy you are.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody for coming to this panel. The other one totally stinks, so you've made the right decision. We will blow your minds. We will say things like native 100 times. So.
Yeah, I would appreciate some people taking people from the Visa panel. That would be great. Thanks for coming. So just to kick it off and get into a little bit of a provocative session, GE has quietly really become a leader in the trend of brands as content creators. Obviously, GE is a massed and huge conglomerate. Everything from medical devices to light bulbs to aircrafts, jet engines. So I think you've made content marketing a really natural extension to what you're already doing. And stuck to really the way that it's supposed to work. Talk about things people care about. Don't talk about yourself. So I'd like to talk a little bit about content marketing, and to use your word, we're going to retire native today and use Paul's definition called indigenous, which I like a lot better. What do you guys think? Indigenous, is that better?
Yeah, there we go. We're making a move to indigenous over native. That's good.
So indigenous social marketing and mobile marketing, we saw some great examples with GE's 6-Second Science Fair and Gravity Day. And these are really cutting edge marketing on this particular platform, was Twitter's Vine. And I haven't seen that many executions. This is certainly one that has stand out and cut through the clutter. So I'd like to ask a question about how do you activate from an idea to execution? And what's the planning cycle like with these newer, less mature sort of mobile platforms? Can you take us through a little bit the planning cycle and also what you learned developing these campaigns, Paul?
Yeah, sure. So we think that with the explosion of attention on mobile, and I think this is one of your studies that showed just how much content is being consumed now on mobile, that there's ample room to step in and to enter into the programming schedule with a man-made event or a totally fabricated thing. I mean, we're a manufacturer, so why not manufacture holidays? And so what you saw up there was Gravity Day, which was 9/8, September 8th, which is the amount of force that gravity exerts in meters per second, and 6-Second Science, which is actually a Vine theme or meme, if you want to call it that people already pursued and that we just stepped into and created a fair. For us, anytime we are at the essence of our brand, which is science, and connecting with people who love it, who are ready to celebrate it, to drop an apple in honor of Isaac Newton, for Pete's sake, we're able to connect, and we're able to do that, obviously, with the specific audience that's currently on Vine, which is of course, a young one, or at least as we found so far. And so the traditional rules, though, of planning or however you would enter into looking at a calendar and a narrative don't always apply. We instead are looking at what are some opportunities to grab a little bit of attention, to create our own programming schedule, and to own a moment, as I think a lot of people have tended to call it. And the rules of that are definitely not traditional. Our partner in both of these programs, VaynerMedia, has just done a phenomenal job of understanding when we can own the moment and then create a value exchange around them.
It was really interesting cutting-edge stuff. And I think Vine's been around for how long? 6 months, 9 months?
Yeah, it started January 24th, I think, and we were on the next day.
How'd the idea develop?
Well, for us, it's about value exchange. So with Vine, I think it's exciting is that it's scaled incredibly quickly. You have a number of celebrities who already have 2 million followers. I mean, people who weren't celebrities before who've become famous through Vine. And you've got this really great creative framework. It's one of those great rules of creativity. You put it in a box, and you're actually able to execute perhaps more successfully than you can if it's just this complete blank canvas. And so we found a way to encourage people to actually contribute. We had 600 6-second science videos created, 1,500 of the Apple Drop Vines created. And then the value exchange part comes in that we create the compilation videos that you saw. The 6-second science video got something like 750,000 views on YouTube. The Gravity Day, not nearly as many. But ultimately, it's a thank you to the community for participating. And so it's, for us, if we can get the conversation turned to science, if we can help celebrate that, if we can invent a day and get people out there participating just for 6 seconds or whatever it takes to create the video, then it's that's fun for us and at the heart of what we do. I mean, I think we as GE, it's funny because we hear often, oh, it's surprising that GE is doing this, and the reality is we were founded by Thomas Edison. If we weren't innovating in marketing, we would be the only ones in the company who aren't doing it. We have 45,000 engineers. While we're a conglomerate, it's very much about opening up what we're doing is about opening up the company. And the way I describe it is, we claim the credibility that the company has earned. And so what my role as a marketer is to simply go out there and to connect people with what we do. And believe it or not, a bunch of science experiments, in its essence, is a lot of what we do.
Great. So staying on the subject for a second of indigenous marketing, this month, I don't know if people read it, there's an article in the New York Times penned by David Carr, and he discussed the state today of content marketing. And I think he interviewed, as part of the article, Joe McCambly, who helped build the first banner or expandable in '94. I think you were around during that time, a long time ago,
No,
20
that's
years
totally
ago.
untrue. I'm 22 years old. Yeah.
So the closing sentence of the article by David Carr at the New York Times actually struck me, and I wanted to discuss it today. The article about content marketing was, quote, "Publishers looking to save the village commons of journalism through innovation should be careful not to set it on fire in the process." So given that quote, and 20 years later, we're still trying to create the new rules in digital for storytelling, where do you see the line? It's refreshing, obviously, that indigenous marketing has taken place, but where do you see the line between advertiser content and editorial content?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple of forces at work here, and a lot of folks, including Joe, with whom I worked at Modem back in the day, are right to highlight the risks in front of editorial publishers between the church and state editorial publisher line. And that, I'll put a pin in that, I'll come back to it. But another major force that is impacting all of us is, of course, how we consume on mobile, which is the feed. And when we talk about native, or as we now are calling it, indigenous, it's a matter of of recognizing that that feed applies not just to the media properties where there's all this kind of debate going on, but to the social platforms too, and to other utility apps. About 3 weeks ago, we did this stunt in connection with our new TV spot, which includes, Michael J. Fox does the VO, and it's got the DeLorean from Back to the Future. And so for a partnership to celebrate the launch of that, we had people able to order up DeLoreans in San Francisco through Uber. And so, assuming everybody knows Uber in the room, and to me, what's more native for Uber than allowing you to order up a car? And the fact that we did it as an advertising stunt is, ultimately still seamless with that experience and that functionality. So that means of consuming with mobile, actually adding value, is native. The social feeds and the fact that, brilliantly, Facebook, when they came out, more or less put brands on the same footing from a display perspective as they did with your friends and family, that's native. And so the challenge becomes when you step into something like some media property, and if the inventory there feels even less of a part of the experience, it stands out all the more glaringly from what you're experiencing in social when you're on the platform. You're experiencing on these other aspects of the platform. So the stripe, the banner is frankly just, I think it stands out more in mobile than it does in our other platforms. And so I recognize that there are challenges in terms of setting that line between editorial and advertising, but I think that it can be navigated with a smart publisher who's really ready to embrace the opportunity.
So let's look at the other side of that conversation, a little bit about the people who say that indigenous or native advertising doesn't scale. Obviously, given your view of digital, it's all about creating a value exchange, whether it's in the form of content or utility. I think that Uber is a great example of that. So the question is, do broader reach options play a role in mobile or digital marketing? Mm-hmm. And is it all really about creative strategy at the end of the day?
I think there are plenty of broad reach options. I think, so back in the 90s, which tragically I do remember, when I was working with Joe at Modem Media, we were in a position where we'd have to create banners that, one property would be 402 pixels wide by 803 pixels height, and then the other one would be 401 pixels wide. And it was just this ludicrous chasing of what publishers thought would fit best with their design. And then IAB came along and we standardized and et cetera, et cetera. And I'd say that to reach scale, some of the same thing needs to happen here with mobile and with native or indigenous. As long as I can keep saying indigenous, I'll leave this panel a happy man. That are similar, which is that the presentation of the inventory needs to be pleasing to the overall experience, not interruptive, if at all possible. And from a content perspective, ultimately, I think that there's plenty of sports scale. There's plenty of news scale. There's BuzzFeed, who's been a partner for us for 3 years now. They're not the only ones out there doing lists. So the content, I think people are so hung up on the fact that the content needs to match exactly that they're missing the broader opportunity, which is that you need to get to work. I've seen mobile apps published by big publishers recently that don't even work when they're in the App Store for 2 or 3 weeks. So I think the takeaway here is invest, come up with new inventory and find a way of presenting that inventory to your buyer.
Great. I have one more question. We're going to get to Q&A. But before I get into the question, can I get a show of hands for ad agencies in the room? Okay. Clients on the brand side in the room? Okay. And then media companies? Okay. Agencies, media companies, some clients. Okay. So this will be an interesting one. So last week, I don't know if everybody saw, there was another article published in Ad Age, pretty provocative, and the name of the article was What Digital Agency Clients, Staff, and Leaders Say in Private. And I think our industry overall enjoys a halo effect of being cool and cutting edge and innovative. But there's certainly a reality versus perception issue. And that obviously holds true whether you're at what particular agency you're at or what particular client that you're at. Especially when you get into new forms of advertising, or should I say less mature, like mobile. So one of the things I wanted to quote was from an unnamed client who said basically, as it relates to mobile and digital, is we used to hire experts as a safe pair of hands. But with our digital agency, it's an ongoing experiment. That's not a bad thing, but it's not a good thing either. So the question I have is, obviously ideas come from everywhere, and from a GE perspective, how do you handle digital, inclusive of mobile advertising, when it comes to the idea, given that there's many paths to that idea? So in terms of whether it's a client internally or the multiple agencies that you use, or even the media companies, where does the idea come from, and particularly for some of the work that you showed us?
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of foundational work that needs to go into doing this, and it can't be underestimated in terms of how long it may take the organization to bring in all the stakeholders, whether they're in marketing, comms, different business levels, different business units, obviously at the scale of GE. So knowing your audience, knowing your themes, your stories, your targets, all that, and having different swim lanes internally is kind of job one. But beyond that, I think when you have a sense of what story you can tell and what kind of value exchanges you can create, you can leave it in many ways up to a talented group of different agencies, and we have a number of different agencies, to do what they do best and to be supported by the agencies around them. The way I describe it is, everyone is going to be an architect, a contractor, and a plumber. And your role, depending on the project, will change. And eventually, you'll get back to being an architect on something that's very much in your particular content expertise. And in the meantime, you're going to be a plumber because you got to support this other campaign that came from somewhere else. But I think if you're able to create a group of really talented folks who each have a stake in it like that, and who are all committed to telling a brand story, you can scale, you can do a ton of great stuff, and you can have a lot of fun, and that's what we're trying to do.
So you're pretty agnostic or open to where it comes from, whether it's the media company, the agency, internally, it doesn't really matter as long as it's the best.
As long as it's the best, and as long as there's consistent thresholds that are at play. And to be sure, we have agencies that are extremely, and I only slightly take issue with that expert line that you mentioned, is just that we have agencies that are incredibly expert in a lot of things that they do and are trusted to do expert work. It's not that they're the only ones who have ideas in that space, but ultimately, we certainly recognize that some can just understand social in ways that others can't. And I think it's in the agency's best interest to be honest about what they do best, too.
Got it. Well, I mean, the work that you showed is actually obviously great breakthrough, whether you're on mobile or social. Putting it all together, I think, is very clean experiences. So great job in terms of sort of your overall strategy. Love to open up to a few questions. We've got a mix of agencies, brands, and media companies in the room. We've got the head of global digital marketing for General Electric to my left. Love to hear some questions around the state of anything that you may want.
Mr. Mendoza, I'm coming your way. We're going to do this Phil Donahue style. I'm going to run out in the audience. Mr. Mendoza, come on, stand up for a second. Go ahead and ask your question.
So, good morning and thank you very much, Paul. My name is Paul as well.
Awesome.
So we got a good name. Wanted to find out from your perspective, globally, how do you tie it all in? Like specifically North America, then you've got Latin America, and then you've got Europe and Asia, APAC.
Yeah.
How do you get the message out there consistently? And what are some of the challenges that you may have really getting the message out there?
Yeah, the question, in case you didn't hear the last part, was what are some of the challenges we may have in getting the message out globally, and how do we work with that? It's an ongoing need from a platform perspective. We work with Percolate to help leverage efficiencies between what we create here in the U.S. and get that out to our different regions. We have about 8 to 10 key regions where we do significant investment in digital globally. But not every story is going to play. And so community management needs to stay within the region. A lot of content creation, probably around 50-50, imported versus home brewed the way it splits, gets created in the region. And I think it's an ongoing opportunity for platform providers who are looking to help the content marketing infrastructure or technology stack build out, and an opportunity for us to figure out how messages truly play across the board. And so in China, for example, we're on WeChat. We're doing some really interesting stuff over there, and platforms that took off over there first. And so we learn from them too.
Great.
Any other questions?
Don't be shy. We have to have something over here.
All right, we got a question over here.
Here we go.
Coming down your way, sir.
Mr. Emmy?
Thank you. With the proliferation of platforms, from social platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook to all the areas where this content is going to eventually live, do you have any best practices as to how you control sort of what data gets spun off from that so you can apply better learnings to future campaigns?
Yeah. Cost per engagement is the one metric that we can actually track across every component. I wouldn't say that I love it, but it's better than nothing. And I think that if you can start to map out a consistent metric across all of them, because understanding what true reach is difficult when you've got X number of followers, but you don't know how many of them actually saw your message. You can do surveys, but that works better on some platforms versus others. We hold on to that which we can document fully, and that is cost per engagement right now. I'm all ears, though. I think that's the challenge. One thing I will say on the proliferation, I actually thought where you're going with this question is, we don't see any risk to taking up a platform early days and then deciding later on that it may no longer be viable for us. I think that somehow or another that became codified as you don't want to abandon anything. I think that's malarkey.
Paul, I have a question. When it comes to content, for example, let's say for YouTube, for example, are you worried at all about a user or some content provider who has tons of followers, tons of subscribers, but the content is kind of not along the same lines as maybe your company kind of motto or creed? Are you worried about the type of content that's put up there, even though it gets a lot of views, a lot of hits? Yeah, I think that the trick with UGC for us is we don't do branded hashtags. So, the Gravity Day you saw wasn't branded, 6 Second Science wasn't branded. So there's not a lot of people, if people want to hop onto a hashtag that we're amplifying with some objectionable content, it's at least kind of a bit visually removed. And I think, too, people are going to do it anyway. People will come after any brand for any reason. So, I think the key thing is we're going to tell our story, and we're going to tell it well. We're going to do it in a way that is recognizing the shared interests we have, and ideally adding value and exchanging value with our audience. Okay, great. We got time for one more question, then we're going to move on. Do we have any last questions? All right, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.